Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. Now, today we're going to be going through a public speaking outline. We're going to be covering introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusions. This is a really nice way in which to kind of center yourself when you're trying to think about a topic, how you'd like to talk about it, and how you'd like to convey it to your audience. Let's look at the first slide. So, first and foremost, with an introduction, we're interested in quotes, stories, statements, getting the interest and attention of an audience. We can do this in a whole host of ways. It's kind of odd for me, for instance, to rush up here and say, "Hi, I'm Dr. Anthony Palomba. I'm going to be teaching public speaking today." Now, granted, I do that because for the sake of the show, I have to do it. But if we think about a really good way to introduce a subject, it might not be that. It might be something different. Instead, I might come up and walk right up and say, "When was the last time you had to give a public speaking address?" Or I could start with something along the lines of, "Who here has spoken at their sibling's wedding or family wedding or any wedding?" It's kind of a more interesting way to broach a topic. It gets audience members interested. It gets them excited. Some people might raise their hands and laugh. When we do that, a few things happen. For one, if you pose a question to the audience, "You there, you there, you there," the audience becomes part of the experience, which is always a good thing. Two, it invites an opportunity for humor. I'm a major proponent of humor. I love humor. Now, granted, humor has its time and place. Can't always introduce humor, but humor is a great way to open up people. Literally, ha ha ha. When people are laughing, their lungs expand. You're making them open to you. You're making their body language open to you. And it's a great way to get them to get a first impression of you. They might like you. You're taking an interest in them. You're taking an interest if they're interested in what you're speaking about. All of those things are conveyed by starting off with a question. Additionally, it allows you to get a sense of your audience. What's their funny bone? How might they respond to a question like this? Are they aware of this particular topic? It's a nice quick barometer of how you might have to present something. And I do this all the time. I had to present a video game study at an academic conference. And so I made the comment about who here is familiar with the all-time selling video game brand, Assassin's Creed. And so people started laughing, one, because it was probably the way that I phrased the question, and two, not a lot of people knew what or who Assassin's Creed was or is. That's fine. I made that mental note as I was going through my presentation. I needed to make sure that I would define it and explain the video game in a really fun way so that my audience would care. Otherwise, what does it matter that I did research surrounding Assassin's Creed? Who cares? Also, finally, asking a question to the audience gives you an opportunity to decompress. You're up here, you might be nervous, you might say to yourself, "My God, I don't know if I'm sweating. Do I smell? Do I look right? Is my shirt tucked in? If I look down, I'm going to look like a jerk. I can't look down. I just looked down. Now I'm a jerk." All of these things are going to be going through our heads. And so if we ask a question, pose something to the audience, maybe have a little bit of interaction, answer one question or have somebody, say something about their brother's wedding or something quick, 10, 15-second conversation, your nerves might chill out. Everybody's laughing, we're relaxed, we're having a good time. That's a really nice atmosphere to create for yourself, and it's going to help propel you forward when you're giving a public speaking address. Moving along with the introduction is this idea of telling a story. Sometimes telling a story or starting to tell a story, as I did with education earlier, is a really nice way to get your audience interested. Education as a rebirth? That's interesting. It's kind of like a story. So if you want to begin a speech, for instance, talking about smoking, you can go right into it, or you can start with, My mother was a smoker from the age of 18 to 29. She had me at 32 years old, and the doctors told her that if she had kept smoking until about the age of 32, the time in which I was born, I would have almost certainly had a learning disability. Whoa. That's going to capture your audience's attention. It's a short story, it's a brief story, but let me tell you something. If you're giving a public speaking address on smoking and why to quit, that'll suck people in. People can relate to that. Empathy is major in giving a public speaking address. If your audience can empathize with you, can say to themselves, yeah, I have a relative who still smokes, or I have a sister or brother who's been married. I've had to give a public speaking address, which really was just making fun of him for not marrying until he was 45. Whatever it is, your audience starts to be able to relate to things. Everybody has a mother, usually. Everybody's been born. People can relate to that simple story about my mother smoking until she was 29 or 30. I've also made that up, by the way. But it sucks you in. It pulls you in. Your audience is interested. Whoa. Another thing could be, have you ever had to live with 8 other people in a room? I did so because growing up in New York City, we couldn't really afford much. And so we lived in an apartment with 8 other people. And we had to make it work. Another way to present that story is, how close do you live to your neighbors? My neighbors were in the same room as me. That's interesting. It grabs people's attention. All of you are interesting. I don't even want to hear it. All of you are interesting. Think of an interesting hook for your story, for your speech of self-introduction. There's got to be something about you that is interesting. I know that there is. I don't even think that there is. I know that there is. You can also start with a quote. Quote is really nice. It's impactful. It's powerful. Anything that might have been said by Martin Luther King Jr., anything that might have been said by Gandhi, anything that might have been said by Michael Jordan. There's a famous Nike, it's either a Nike commercial or Gatorade commercial. Michael Jordan talks about failing. And he says, I've missed 3,000 shots and I've been given the ball 45 times to win the game and I've lost. I've failed and failed and failed and still I succeed. I remember that commercial and it's at least 20 years old. But it gets people's attention. If I was to give a speech about succeeding or how failing has helped me succeed, which is very true, that's not a bad way to start it. Even a superstar like Michael Jordan believes in failure. It's very interesting. Strong quotes will help couch your public speaking address and give people a sense of where you're going. Let's go to the next slide. For this, you should be aware of your main points. From point to point, you should focus on transitions. If you're talking about moving from Chile to the United States to then Queens, New York specifically, think about linking you going from Chile to moving to the United States. So the last sentence in the first paragraph about Chile should be about potentially moving on to the United States. And then that second paragraph could start with, when I finally arrived in the United States from Chile, I was exhausted but eager to move to Tennessee. And then in that paragraph, you can talk about how you went from living in Tennessee to eventually moving to Queens, New York, for instance. So you want to really think about how you are couching your paragraphs and linking them up. Let's go to the final slide. Conclusion. When you are discussing your final point, you will be good for the conclusion. Let your audience know you're about to finish. Start to sum up things. In your conclusion, the first sentence can be somewhat similar to your thesis statement. I did this in my speech that I gave to you earlier. Education has served as a rebirthing process. through Syracuse University, University of Florida, and afterwards, education has served as a birthing ground. Syracuse University helped me grow and learn what it is to be a TV professional. University of Florida helped me further refine myself through being an academic doctor. And then finally, I was able to have professional and academic experiences after completing my PhD. And then I went into talking about basketball court and revisiting Florida and revisiting Syracuse and saying to myself, when I go to the Florida games now, I look at where I was reborn again as an academic professional. That's a really nice way to start and conclude your conclusion. So if you're struggling with your conclusion, I want you to think about that first sentence. Reword it using your thesis statement. Do not use your thesis statement as the first sentence in your conclusion. Please avoid that. Do not do that. You will not look good. Simply reword it. Just rephrase your thesis statement a little bit. It will help you in summing up your conclusion. And remember, you're not all going to remember everything that I've said. Your audience will not remember everything that you've said. Your conclusion is meant to kind of sum up the main points. If I'm going to walk away with 3 things, if I'm going to walk away with a piece of imagery, if I'm going to walk away with a particular fact, let me walk away with that. Let me also add that starting with a fact or statistic is also a really great way of starting off a public speaking address in your introductory paragraph as well. Well, that's it for Late Night Learning. Thank you so much for being here. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.